If someone told me this happened, I'd probably think they were exaggerating. I used to believe GPS devices were simple tools. They either worked or they didn't. But after what happened in the White Ridge Mountains, I stopped trusting technology, and I stopped hiking alone. We weren't lost. We had a fully charged GPS, paper maps, emergency supplies, and years of backcountry experience. Everything was going exactly as planned until our GPS suddenly recalculated and displayed a route that shouldn't have existed. At the end of that route was a single destination. No name, no trail, just one small icon, labeled cabin. We followed it, expecting to find an abandoned ranger station or an old hunting shelter. Instead, we found a place that doesn't exist on any official map, a cabin that somehow knew we were coming. It was supposed to be a simple 2-day hike through White Ridge Mountains. My friend Ethan and I had spent weeks planning the trip. We downloaded offline maps, marked every campsite, checked weather forecasts, and even informed the local ranger station of our exact route. Nothing about the expedition was spontaneous. The first several hours were uneventful. Morning fog drifted through the pine trees, while sunlight slowly filtered across the ridges. Birds filled the forest with constant calls, and every landmark matched both our GPS and paper maps perfectly. Around noon, we stopped beside a narrow stream to refill our water bottles. That was when Ethan's GPS beeped. A message appeared. Better route found. Neither of us had ever seen that notification before. There wasn't supposed to be another route. The trail ahead was the only marked path leading toward our campsite. Curious, Ethan opened the navigation screen. A thin blue line had appeared, leading away from the official trail and deep into untouched forest. At the end of the line was a single location marker, cabin. No elevation data, no address, no notes, just one word. We checked my GPS. Nothing. Only the official hiking trail. Thinking Ethan's device had glitched, we restarted it. The mysterious route remained. Then we unfolded our paper map. The blue line crossed terrain where no trail had ever been recorded. Maybe it's an old logging road, Ethan suggested. It seemed possible. Old mountain roads often disappeared from modern maps after decades of neglect. Against our better judgment, curiosity won. We left the marked trail and followed the GPS into the trees. Within minutes, the forest became unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to disappear. The only sound left was our boots crunching over pine needles. Nearly an hour later, we reached a patch of soft mud. Fresh footprints crossed directly in front of us. Large hiking boots, perfectly clear. Whoever made them had passed only minutes earlier. The strange part wasn't the footprints. It was where they were heading. Straight into a section of forest, so dense that no visible path existed. Yet Ethan's GPS insisted, keep following the route. The farther we walked, the stranger everything became. The trees grew taller and closer together, blocking most of the afternoon sunlight. Moss covered fallen logs like thick green blankets, and the air felt noticeably colder. Then we smelled smoke. Fresh wood smoke. Both of us stopped. Someone was nearby. But according to every map we carried, the nearest cabin or ranger station was more than 20 miles away. We continued cautiously. A few minutes later, the trees suddenly opened. There it was. A weathered wooden cabin stood alone in a small clearing. Its roof was old, but intact. A stone chimney released a thin ribbon of gray smoke. Flower boxes beneath the windows held fresh wildflowers. Someone clearly lived here. But something immediately felt wrong. There were no roads, no vehicle tracks, no hiking trail, no chopped firewood stacked outside, no signs that supplies had ever been brought in. It was as if the cabin had simply appeared in the middle of the wilderness. Ethan quietly checked the GPS. The destination marker had disappeared. The screen now simply read, "You have arrived." I walked around the cabin searching for another path. Nothing. The clearing ended only a few yards beyond the walls, before dense forest swallowed everything again. Then I noticed something hanging beside the front door. An old wooden sign. The paint had nearly faded away. Only a few words remained readable. "Welcome back." I looked at Ethan. "We've never been here." He nodded slowly. "I know." Then, without anyone touching it, the front door creaked open by itself. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to reveal a dark hallway inside, as if someone had quietly invited us in. Every instinct told us to leave. Instead, we stepped inside. The air was warm, carrying the smell of burning cedar and fresh coffee. The interior looked surprisingly clean. A cast-iron stove glowed with hot coals. A kettle gently steamed. 2 ceramic mugs sat on the table. One of them was still warm. Someone had been here only moments ago. He was already checking the other rooms. The bedroom was empty. The storage room was empty. The attic ladder was folded into the ceiling. No one. Yet the cabin felt occupied. Then a burst of static echoed through the room. An old emergency radio sitting on a shelf suddenly came to life. Only static. No voices. No signal. After a few seconds, it fell silent again. On the wooden table lay a thick leather journal. Its cover was cracked with age. Across the front, burned into the leather, were 2 words: Visitor Log. I opened the first page. The earliest entry was dated over 50 years ago. A hiker described losing his route after his GPS guided him to an unknown cabin. Another entry came years later. Then another. Dozens of stories. Different names, different decades, different weather. Yet every account described the same impossible journey. Each person claimed their GPS had discovered a cabin that didn't exist on any map. My heartbeat quickened as I flipped toward the final pages. The last completed entry had been written only 3 days earlier. The handwriting ended with one chilling sentence: "If you're reading this, the cabin has already chosen you." Before either of us could speak, the emergency radio crackled again. This time, through the static, a calm voice whispered just one sentence: "You're right on time." Neither of us moved. The voice on the radio had sounded calm, almost welcoming. Then the static returned, swallowing the room in white noise before the radio fell silent again. Ethan grabbed his backpack. "We're leaving, right now." For the first time since entering the cabin, I agreed without hesitation. We stepped outside. The clearing looked exactly as it had before, except our footprints were gone. The soft dirt where we'd walked only moments earlier was perfectly smooth, as if no one had ever crossed it. A cold knot formed in my stomach. "Ethan." He didn't answer. He was staring at his GPS. The screen flashed once. Then another notification appeared. "Calculating route." A blue line slowly formed. Instead of leading away from the cabin, it circled around it. One complete loop. Then another. Then it ended exactly where we were standing. No route available. We ignored it and picked a direction anyway. The forest swallowed us within seconds. We walked for nearly 20 minutes without speaking. Every tree looked identical. Every ridge seemed unfamiliar. Finally, sunlight broke through the branches ahead. Relieved, we hurried toward the opening. But as we stepped into the clearing, the cabin stood directly in front of us, exactly where we'd started. Neither of us said a word. We tried again. This time we walked downhill following a small stream. Water always leads somewhere, except this stream didn't. It emptied into the very same clearing. The cabin waited in complete silence, almost patiently. As we approached, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A second journal rested on the porch. It hadn't been there earlier. My name was written across the cover. I slowly opened it. Only one page had writing. Today's date. Beneath it were 3 lines. You will try to leave. You will come back. You always do. Before I could say anything, a loud thump echoed from inside the cabin. Something heavy had fallen upstairs. The problem was, neither of us had seen a staircase. The front door slowly swung open again. This time, we didn't remember opening it. Inside, the cabin felt different, longer. The hallway seemed to stretch farther than before. At the end of it, a narrow staircase now climbed into darkness. It definitely hadn't existed earlier. Against every instinct, we climbed. Each step groaned beneath our boots. The upstairs consisted of only one room, except for dozens of old GPS devices arranged neatly across wooden shelves. Some were decades old. Others looked almost brand new. Every screen displayed the same destination: cabin. On a small desk sat another leather journal. This one was open. The ink was still wet. At the top of the page was today's date. Below it were two names, mine and Ethan's. The entry described everything we'd experienced: the strange route, the footprints, the radio, the journal downstairs, every detail, word for word. Except the final paragraph hadn't happened yet. At sunrise, they will leave. Only one of them will remember the cabin. A floorboard creaked behind us. We spun around. No one was there, but the room suddenly felt colder. Every GPS device turned on at the same time. Their screens lit the room with an eerie blue glow. Then, together, they began recalculating, not searching for the cabin, searching for us. The radio downstairs crackled one final time. Sunrise is almost here. The lights on every GPS went dark. The cabin shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed my arm, and we ran. Down the stairs, through the front door, across the clearing. The forest was covered in thick white fog. We kept running until the trees finally opened onto the official hiking trail. The cabin was gone. There was only forest. No clearing, no chimney, no smoke, nothing. Hours later, park rangers returned with us to the GPS coordinates. They searched the area for nearly 6 hours. There wasn't a single foundation stone. No old road, no ruins, no evidence that any building had ever stood there. The location was untouched wilderness. The ranger looked at us and smiled politely. "You're not the first hikers to report a cabin out here." "What happened to the others?" Ethan asked. The ranger hesitated. They could never find it again. For weeks, we convinced ourselves it had been exhaustion, stress, maybe even a shared hallucination. Then one evening, I opened the GPS I'd carried that day. It powered on by itself. No batteries, no charging cable, just one saved location. Not coordinates, not an address, only a single word: cabin. A new route slowly appeared across the screen. At the bottom was one final message: better route found. I turned the device off. I locked it in a drawer. I haven't touched it since. But every few nights, I hear a faint electronic beep coming from inside that drawer. And somehow, each time I hear it, the distance to the cabin is getting shorter.